Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and I know I do a lot of Penn Reels, but this is one that many of you may not have seen before. And interestingly enough, it's often mistaken for a Penn 3.0. It's another one of those hybrid reels that came out, probably in the 60s, but I'm looking with the bullet handle. It's an older Bakelite handle, and the old thumb strap, the leather strap, should give you an indication about the age of this reel. So it might be 50s, but I'll have to go back and check. This is the Penn 259 live liner. It's a Long Beach live liner. It was designed, live lining is where you would hook on a live bait fish, something similar to a menhaden or a moss bunker, alawite, whatever you happen to call those fish around your area. But this one's got the embossed plate on the side, so I'm thinking even 40s and 50s now, but we'll have to go back and do a little bit of research on that. At any rate, I wanted to show you the reel, and we will rebuild this reel. Oftentimes it's mistaken for the Senator because it has the metal trim rings on both sides. Interestingly enough, it's about the size of a Jigmaster, and the Jigmaster bars can actually fit this, the solid one-piece bars, if you wanted to do a modification on this one. So I will assume that the Jigmaster spool can also fit this, as well as the Jigmaster reel seat. So it's kind of a hybrid reel, or I like to call them sometimes Franken reels, in that it looks like Penn went to the spare parts bin, picked a couple of pieces of everything and put a reel together. But this one is in the Long Beach series, so let's go ahead and take this one apart, show you how it works. I've got some spare drags here from the Long Beach drag sets. I would fully expect to use them as we rebuild this reel because I'm not familiar with the age and I don't know what it looks like on the inside. So let's go ahead and take it apart. What I do expect to see is a side plate that looks very much like a Penn Mod 60, which would be the short chassis Long Beach reel. And if you see that type of an engineering structure to it, then you know that you can deal with that. You can deal with the Penn 65, you can deal with the 285, which is the Delmar reel, and you can also deal with the 85, which is the Seaboy reel, because they all basically share parts, and most of the time it's a good, better, best kind of a solution. It would go Seaboy, Delray, and then Long Beach. Mechanically all about the same, but cosmetically different in that the trim patterns are different. So you only had Bakelite on the Seaboys. On the Delmar, you had a little heavier Bakelite on the side plate, and then you went into metal spool, and then on the Long Beach you had the metal side trims. Well, this is interesting. So the first thing you do, you figure out that somebody probably sold this reel because it wasn't working properly, and we've got age-old line in here. I'm not quite sure what that is. Looks like monofilament, but that's probably what caused this reel to go into the bargain bin. And as many of you know, I pick up reels sometimes for parts, sometimes for curiosity. In this case, I picked this one up in a bargain bin, and now we know why. I can also see some broken line behind the bridge plate. So my guess is that when we take this off, we'll find a little bit more. Here's another piece here. So my guess is that what happened on this one is that somebody gave up on the reel after the line got broken. How does the line get broken? How does it even get in there? If it's poor spool adjustment, and we can see here, although I haven't tightened it down, there's some play between the spool and the side plate, and under tension you can have the line slip in there. And how do you fix that? Well, you fix that by adjusting this tensioner so that the spool lines up better with the side plate and doesn't cause that. While I'm at it, I might as well just check the other side plate here. We're going to do a rebuild on this side. I'll come back and clean this one later. These aren't very collectible, but they are rarer than some of the other pens that are out there. For the purpose of this video, we're just going to go make this one work again. So you can see there's a lot of corrosion and greening on this. If I wanted to, again, I could upgrade this and use the Penn cross posts for the Jigmaster. That would work. I could probably even come up and change this over. I'm just trying to see if this has a 500 on a spool. I'm guessing that this is pre-Jigmaster, much like the Surfmaster 250. The Surfmaster 250 parts would probably work on here as well. So I'm just going to rub this quickly with some steel wool just to get the residual junk off the side here, because I saw that line sitting in there. But the spool appears to be okay. We've lubricated the bearing side. We're just going to go ahead and put that in here for now. So let's go to work on the gear side then. We'll do that by removing the set screw that holds the handle screw on. And as you'll notice, I'm putting all my pieces and parts into a parts tray. I like to do that so I know where to find those parts on reassembly. It's just a nice place to keep everything central. And right now, speaking of things keeping central, I'm trying to find my screw nut wrench. Should be in here somewhere. That's what happens when I go about cleaning my bench. I sometimes misplace my tools for a moment. But no problem. I have the older version. Many of you know I have an aftermarket wrench, but I have the good old-fashioned Penn wrench. We'll go ahead and use that one for this. I probably should have spent some time prepping myself and finding that wrench. I'm sure it will show up shortly. Here it is right here. I just put it off to the side. So one turn, and this one's coming out loose. So that's a good sign. This is an older reel, but I don't have any broken or stuck parts at the moment. It seems like we'll be in good condition with that. We do have a lot of accumulated junk on here. So what I like to use is a 4.0 steel wool, which is the finest of the steel wools that are available. The coarser you get, you may scratch things, but the 4.0 seems to be pretty good. And I use a metal polish. In this case, I use a Turtle Wax chrome polish. That's just enough abrasive to get some of the standing buildup from the lubrications and that may have spilled out. It's also a chrome polish, so to the extent that you have chrome left on these pieces, it can polish it up. But as a general cleaning agent, I kind of think that between the two of them, that it works well. So so here we go. We'll just spend a second here just making sure that this gets about as clean as we can get it for the effort put into it at the moment. Again, I'll probably come back and clean some of this up, but a lot of this metal is pitted, and that's not going to clean up that great. So for the purposes of this video, we're just going to make sure that the reel is mechanically sound, and we're going to do that right now. So you'll also notice I mentioned my part basket. I like to mention as well that I do use a protective glove on my non-working hand. That's just to keep the oils and contaminants out of there. And like this one we've seen, it's got a lot of oil and stuff on it. I'm not quite sure what that's all about, so it doesn't hurt to keep that stuff off of your hand if you can. All right, this setup is very comparable to most of the Penn reels that are out there. It's a standard bridge plate with 4 screws. The 4 screws are different. The 2 on the top are partially threaded. That's because there's a spring that rides on them, and the 2 on the bottom are fully threaded. And you just need to make a note that you get that correct, because if you put the fully threaded screw into the top where those springs are, there's a chance that the spring can catch on the thread and fail to work properly. So just go ahead and do that. I always encourage folks to take pictures along the way and to know the steps, mark the steps of how you took the reel apart so that you could put it back together. There's also schematics available. I showed this schematic on a different video, but there's you can go to websites out there and find the Penn schematic that shows you how this reel comes together, so that if you get lost in the process, there's a blueprint for you to follow in terms of putting it back together from an exposed view standpoint. So this is very much the side plate for an older Penn Long Beach reel. It has the flat spring for the anti-reverse dog as opposed to the coil spring. So I'm thinking 50s on this reel. This looks identical to a 60s, a Penn 60 bridge. And we got some more of that broken line in there, just went somewhere. And we've got a lot of glop and contamination. And just because it's an older reel, like I said, I went ahead and I pulled the drag washers for this, just because I'm not going to waste any time trying to save what are probably 30 or 40-year-old drag washers when I rebuild the reel. There's just, if you're putting the effort in on the front end to take the reel apart, the $1.50 or whatever that a drag washer costs is just not worth saving. If you're going to have one of them fail the next time you take it out and go through the whole process again. So I mentioned the flat spring. There's a flat spring that holds that anti-reverse dog in place. We'll show you how to reinstall that when we go back and fix the balance of this reel. So I want to make sure that this reel is clean. It's relatively clean. I use a couple of things to make the reel restore the side plate. I like to generally put a light degreaser on it, like a WD-40, and then I'll go in with a cotton swab to try and work off some of the stuff that is accumulated along the track. This is where the main gear rides, and that's usually where most of it gets squeezed out. And then to the extent that it's accumulated on the pieces of the side plate, I like to go in on that one as well. So, and now I'm just using a paper towel to kind of clean out the rest of that channel. And we'll go ahead and just use a Q-tip for some of those hard to reach places on the other side here. So otherwise, this reel is fairly clean. It doesn't require a lot of maintenance other than the cleaning there. We're going to go ahead and re-lube now after I just clear out these two tracks where the spool rides. And maybe that's why there's some accumulated junk in here. Maybe that's why the spool got loosened. It was probably rubbing up against it. And when it got loosened, it allowed the line inside to get trapped. So, all right, so back to the blue grease. The blue grease is a general purpose grease. It's a Penn precision reel grease. Happens to be a Penn reel I'm working on, but that's immaterial to the grease you use. Just make sure that the grease you are using is a grease that's designed for fishing reels. And I get that comment or that question an awful lot on the videos. You know, can I use a general purpose grease? Can I use lithium? Can I use automotive greases? All those kinds of things. I've seen people use Vaseline. And the answer is you can use just about anything. I mean, Vaseline is a petroleum-based jelly. But if you use one that's designed for fishing reels, you're going to get the maximum protection out of it. And it's not that expensive, so go ahead and go use that. I'm also going to put a little bit of the blue grease onto the eccentric while I'm at it. The eccentric controls the spool, the free spool release. And then I'm going to go put the jack in here, which is the transition piece between the eccentric and the yoke or the gear mechanism. And we'll just go ahead and put a little bit of grease on the front of that as well, as that's going to slide behind the bridge plate. Okay, so that's the top end is done just as you've seen it. If you took pictures, you would have seen that that's exactly the way it came off. And when you reinstalled, you could check against those pictures if you were unsure. Okay, here's your main assembly. Like I mentioned, there's enough grease on this, so we don't have to go do any severe cleaning here. We can check to make sure that it's relatively clean. Again, I'm just wiping it with a paper towel because there was a lot of grease on this, so it stood the test there. I'm just making sure there's no more broken line or anything there that might get in the way. All right, so let's go over and rebuild this this drag assembly then. I'm going to push the drags through the other side, just as I thought. These are the older drags. They're probably brittle. I'm going to guess that this will, well, this one's actually got some life in it. Most of the time you do that and it'll snap, but that's all right. I got the newer version of the drag washers here, so I'm going to go ahead and use them. Again, if these were contaminated with any salt water, if they were kind of jammed up, if they looked corroded, you would want to replace the metal pieces. But these are just showing normal wear. They're still smooth. There's no pitting or anything that would just to become a problem with the drag washer operation. So we're just going to take that old grease off, and then we're going to go over and we're going to install new washers. So I'm going to grab these. The Penn part is a 6-60 for those of you that may need to order something like this. They're the newer HT100 kind of a washer, and there's no sense, again, with this open for a washer that cost $1.50 to even fool around with this. Okay, so we have the backing washer on. We're going to put the main gear on. And this is how it sets up then. It sets up with the main gear, then a fabric drag, a metal washer, another fabric drag. The middle metal washer is tabbed, keyed, or eared, depending on how you hear it called. Then we finish with a metal washer and then the cap washer on top of that. Fabric washers should get some dry grease to keep them flexible. I use a Cal's Universal Grease. It's available at most sporting goods stores and online. Again, most manufacturers will also make a general purpose or a dry grease. And you'll see I just put a little bit on the washer and then I'm rubbing it in with my gloved hand so that it's evenly spread. And again, another reason why to wear a glove, you can also use that glove a little bit as a tool when you're doing something like this. So again, we'll just do a little bit of the grease on there, rub it around good, get it in there, and then again, the middle washer then is the eared washer, or the keyed washer, and there's an indentation in the main gear. You just got to find it, and when you put it in, you will know because it'll sit down just a little bit below the gear surface. And I'm having a little bit of trouble finding it at the moment, but there it is. And you can see that it sits inside the main gear. And you must make certain that you get that inside the main gear. If not, you're going to bend those tabs and your drag is not going to work properly. So here's your last one. Little dose of the Cal's Universal Grease. Pop that on top. Last of the metal gears, dry washers. And then we can go up top with this. So I'm looking on the inside of this. Normally you can pull that gear sleeve if you want and check it out and clean it up. Matter of fact, I can do it with the stack on even, I think. I'm going to guess that I can push this through. Just take a shot. Most of the time when I rebuild a reel, I don't go to this effort of pulling that gear sleeve unless I notice that it's dragging terribly. But since I'm making a video here, I might as well show you how to do that while I'm at it as an afterthought. Okay, so there's a pin. You can see the pin coming out here. There's a pin that holds the gear sleeve on. And then a little bit of a pliers or something to pull the rest of it out. That's your pin. And again, a good place to put this is into the parts bucket because you need to find it. Again, we rebuilt the whole thing. Yeah, and this is fine. That's what I expected. So again, you can clean that up. You can grab a little paper towel, in this case that's been oiled well. Sometimes these channels get filled with junk. In that case, if you found that it got filled with junk, you could go ahead and clean it up, maybe using that steel wool, maybe using a light wire brush or something else. And then once you're sure that it's cleaned up that way, you can go back, put the gear sleeve back onto the shaft, push that pin in, and whoever gets this reel next will know that it's been completely and fully serviced. I'm going to go ahead and put this on. Now sometimes you can put a blue grease on that shaft. I like to use a reel oil there. In this case I'm using Reelex. It's an aftermarket reel oil. But any oils that are provided by the manufacturer, regardless of who that manufacturer is, will work fine. Okay, so now we got this rebuilt completely. It's time to go put the rest of this back together. So let me just get my greases out of the way. Go to my parts tray, which is where I know this stuff is, and we'll go ahead and reinstall that anti-reverse dog with the flat spring. So the flat spring is going to sit on top of the anti-reverse dog, which is going to sit on this screw. It's the right side if you're looking at the side plate from the back end. It's going to wrap around this post and it's going to lay on this portion here. In order to get that properly seated, you need to push down on the bridge mechanism. You're going to put the bridge in and make it about a halfway turn so that you can cover the gear that you were pressing down with. Once you do that, you grab the anti-reverse dog and you insert that on the ratchet behind the main gear. Then we've got our flat spring. Again, flat spring is going to lay on top of the dog. And I'm reusing this flat spring. It seems to have enough tension in it. If you needed to replace this flat spring, it's still available as a part from mysticparts.com. And it is a spring, so you'll notice I'm holding my finger on that as we're doing this work. But I'm going to take that off and trust that I don't shake this up too much. And you can see on this that the flat spring is laying against the inside, around the pivot, and on top of the anti-reverse dog. That's how that gets set. Once you do that, you can continue the rotation of that bridge, rotating completely around until you see the screw in this bridge screw hole. What I like to do there is just take a quarter turn or so just to make sure that screw is seated. I don't want to do too much more than that because these bridge plates move, and I want to make sure that I can get the rest of the screws in before I tighten down on any one. They're pretty close tolerances. Okay, with that I'm going to take the one that's partially threaded, that goes on the top, and I like to do these in an X pattern. Bottom, top, alternating sides. And you need to put the ones that are partially threaded into the top piece, because if you don't put it in the top piece and put one of those threaded ones in, again, the threads can catch on those screws, and if they catch on the screws, then it may impede the operation of that free spool release. Okay, that's 3 out of 4. And again, you can see the value of that parts tray there. You can just reach in there, look for the piece that you're trying to find. And the other thing with that, it's kind of interesting to note, is if your parts tray has got pieces and parts left when you think you're done, then you can go back to your pictures of the schematic and find out why there's still a piece in there even though you thought you put them all back together. With that, we're going to put the ferrule back in. I'm going to grab that slightly cleaned up star nut, and we're going to give it a test. So we are working really pretty good at the moment. We're going to go ahead and flip the free spool, make sure that we're working well there, and now we can reassemble that on here. So we've already lubed the one side. I'm going to put a little bit of lubrication onto the spool shaft. That spool shaft is going inside this gear, the spool gear, and we didn't do any lube there, so this is a good time to put something in there. And then we're just going to line up the holes on this. And again, just like the other one, I like to work kind of northeast, southwest on these. Get one started. And if you try to work this thing clockwise, sometimes it gets a little squirrely. Sometimes you have more difficulty because the tension on the spool is going the wrong way, and you just want to go fix that. So here's the other thing you need to know if you weren't paying attention before. We have 2 different side plate size screws. Some of this stuff I just take for granted, but you'll see that one is shorter than the other. The short ones go below on the reel seat, the long ones go into the crossbars. So I was just looking, as I said, I kind of going west, now I'm going south. I'm going to put the shorter one in here because that's the reel seat. I'm going to put the longer one back up top here on the other side. And now I've got equal tension across, so as I go and load these now, I can come back and I can tighten the others and then fill in the holes, that the screws that are missing. And I'm going to go first to the other short screw and put that in the reel seat on the bottom here. And then we'll put the last 2 on, we'll put the handle on, and we'll kind of know that it's all doing what it's supposed to be doing. There's your long one for the second of these. And interestingly enough, so this is kind of a Franken reel, right? It's a little bit of a Jig Master, it's a little bit of a Senator, it's a lot of the Long Beach, which it's in the Long Beach series. Again, it's the 259. Not too many people are even familiar that this reel exists. And you can know that it really is. It's a reel out there. If you do see it for sale somewhere, it is a real model number. Somebody didn't make a mistake or that in terms of listing it or telling you for sale. But you don't see many of them around. And again, because it has the long beach gear set, it's a lower ratio, 3-2, or I'm sorry, probably 3-1 or something like that. And if you go to a jig master, you have a higher level speed. So you wouldn't want to, if you're going to do jigging or that, you wouldn't want to do this reel. You would want to do the jig master. If you're doing drop fishing, it doesn't have the capacity of a Penn 65 because it's more of a narrow channel spool. So it kind of just fits in between. The idea of the live lining, again, was just release your bail, let your line run, hold it with that leather thumb pad, but fish the reel essentially with the free spool open at all time, letting it kind of run away. And then when you got your strike, bring it back and bring it in. So we've cleaned this one up. Working just the way it should. You can hear that anti-reverse in the background there, kind of clicking away. And what I'll do a little bit later is I'll come back and I'll take that steel wool and that chrome and I'll clean up the spool and that. But I know that the purpose of this channel is to show you how to repair the reel. I don't know if everybody wants to see me doing the dishes, if you will, but we'll clean these up again. So last thing, I still got that gap in that spool there because that's the way it came out. That's how line got in there to get trapped. So the adjustment is on this side, and you just want to tighten this down. What I like to do is tighten it all the way down till the spool does not move, but that's not the proper adjustment for a spool. You actually have to back it off about 1/4 of a turn till you feel some free play in that spool.